Without the theory of evolution, there is no secular humanism. While many scientists hold that evolution is a theory, humanists believe evolution is a fact. Evolution is a fact amply demonstrated by the fossil record and by contemporary molecular biology. Natural selection is a successful theory devised to explain the fact of evolution. Carl Sagan. Since God does not exist, and only nature does, then life must have risen from inorganic matter by natural, random means. Man is the result of a purposeless and natural process that did not have him in mind. He was not planned. He is a state of matter, a form of life, a sort of animal. George Gaylord Simpson. Secular humanists believe that 3 to 4 billion years ago, the first speck of life came into existence by a series of accidental combinations of chemicals and energy. A cell was eventually produced. From that first cell, other cells were created, eventually forming simple plants and animals. Over time, fish formed, which continued to evolve into amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and eventually primates. These primates are the ancestors of man. This entire evolutionary process took place through natural selection and mutation. No supernatural being created or guided the process. Charles Darwin's The Origin of Species Through Natural Selection, or The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life, is an essential book for secular humanists. Darwin insisted that natural selection must take place over long periods of time. It acts solely by accumulating slight, successive, favorable variations. It can produce no great or sudden modification. It can act only by short and slow steps. Most secular humanists implicitly trust Darwin's explanation, although an increasing number are accepting Stephen Jay Gould's more recent and radical theory of punctuated equilibrium. This theory says that species remain the same for great periods of time, but they occasionally and rather abruptly evolve from one species into another.
Evolutionary theory faces problems in every area. It's pretty well known that it doesn't fit the fossil record. The fossil record does not show this pattern of slow, gradual, step-by-step change from one kind of thing into another. It shows variation within the type. Evolutionary naturalism, the Darwinian kind of evolution, doesn't fit the genetic evidence. When you try to test it, you find you can't make the big changes. You just produce birth defects when you induce mutations in organisms. It doesn't face the molecular evidence. Michael Behe has shown how molecular structures are irreducibly complex. You can't build them up by a blind, step-by-step process. So if you go from one area to another, you see it's nothing but problems and evasions, you see, to try to answer the problems. And you go to a scientist in one specialty and he'll say, I know it's all problems here, but after all, they've got it proved in all the other areas. See, so you go to the other areas and you find that it's just as bad or worse. But the worst problem is none of these things that I've mentioned. The worst problem is that living organisms are full of complex operating systems that need a program to direct their operations. Everybody knows there has to be something instructing those billion proteins where to go and what to do. And the evolutionary science has no idea how to construct such a program, no mechanism at all. That's the biggest problem.
Although in his mind Marx had formed a firm foundation for atheism, he still needed some kind of scientific confirmation that his view of the nature of man was correct. He turned to Charles Darwin. As Marx and Engels developed their communistic worldview, Darwin and his theory of evolution were creating a stir among many 19th century intellectuals. Darwin's theory provided the foundation for a materialistic perspective on life. Marx and Engels quickly adopted Darwin's theory of evolution as the scientific foundation for their worldview. They believed that evolutionary theory was truth, that the argument for evolution was so strong it would never be disproved. But Marxist-Leninists added their own twist to Darwin's theory, a twist they call punctuated evolution. Darwin's Origin of the Species contained the scientific basis for Marx's views on the class struggle. Marx. I have read Darwin's work on natural selection. This is the book which contains the basis in natural science for our view.
When Marx read Darwin's work on the origin of species, he told Engels that this was the foundation stone. This was at least the scientific foundation stone of their theory of class warfare. So from a Marxist point of view, Darwinian evolution is extremely, extremely important.
Not only did Darwin's theory explain how humans have evolved from mere molecules, Marx even believed that it explained the evolution of societies. But Darwin's theory called for slow, gradual evolution through natural selection and the survival of the fittest. Marxism needed a revolutionary theory with clashes and dramatic, sudden changes.
The Marxists were looking for something a little bit more revolutionary than evolutionary, which aids what they think is their communist point of view.
Many Marxists today believe that the idea of punctuated equilibrium is the answer. This theory says that species remain the same for great periods of time, but they occasionally and abruptly evolve from one species into another. This theory attempts to explain why we find gaps in the fossil record. Evolution simply took place too quickly to leave any direct evidence.
Marxists use the theory of evolution to discredit anyone who suggests the existence of the supernatural. Evolutionary theory provides justification both for Marxist theology and philosophy. Without this foundation, Marxists are unable to explain the history of civilization according to their worldview. The theory of evolution appears to make atheism a scientific perspective. Without evolution, there can be no avoiding the Creator. And Marxists must avoid a Creator at all costs. All humanistic worldviews advance some form of evolution. But unlike the secular humanist and Marxist-Leninist worldviews, New Agers believe in a form of cosmic evolution. They believe that human beings will inevitably evolve into a general state of God consciousness, realizing their divinity. Only when this consciousness is achieved will there be peace and harmony on earth. The God force behind evolution provides the guarantee that the final state of unity, enlightenment, and oneness is inevitable.
Instead of focusing on biological evolution, cosmic humanists look to spiritual evolution as the process of achieving personal enlightenment and God consciousness. Pop psychologist M. Scott Peck writes, "God wants us to become himself, or herself, or itself. We are growing toward Godhood. God is the goal of evolution. It is God who is the source of the evolutionary force, and God who is the destination. This is what we mean when we say that He is the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end."
So far, evolution has been an unconscious process, but now that human beings have become self-conscious, you need to take charge of evolution and realize your divinity by going within your own consciousness.
Cosmic humanists believe that evolution takes place not only on an individual level, but also on a collective level. Marilyn Ferguson writes, "The proven plasticity of the human brain and human awareness offers the possibility that individual evolution may lead to collective evolution. When one person has unlocked a new capacity, its existence is suddenly evident to others, who may then develop the same capacity. Not every individual in the world will evolve at the same rate, but when enough people have achieved this higher consciousness, unenlightened individuals will naturally be drawn into the collective consciousness." New Age thinkers recognize that this view of evolution best fits the currently reigning evolutionary hypothesis known as punctuated equilibrium. This is the theory that evolution takes place primarily through periodic jumps in evolutionary growth, rather than through a simple gradualism. Thus, humanity may remain in an unenlightened state for a long period of time, but in a relatively short time span, we will all encounter an evolutionary quantum leap.
Cosmic humanists take evolutionary theory a step beyond the secular humanist Darwinism and the Marxist idea of materialistic evolution, sometimes called punctuated equilibrium. Here, the focus is on the evolution of consciousness. As humans gain a greater consciousness of their divinity, as they grow in self-consciousness, self-actualization, self-realization, they evolve mentally and spiritually. This kind of evolution begins on the individual level, but it quickly moves to a collective level. The goal is a collective consciousness.
Instead of further human physical evolution determined by geography, environment, and natural selection, cosmic humanists hope for psychological or spiritual evolution.
New Age ideas pervade Western culture. Such beliefs as the spiritual unity of all things, the laws of karma, the cycles of reincarnation, and the insights of astrology have become commonplace. Politicians, teachers, and scientists, even many religious leaders, otherwise associated with traditional religions, hold these beliefs. In Part 2, we will continue our study of the influential cosmic humanist worldview as we examine the disciplines of psychology, sociology, law, politics, economics, and history.
Biblical Christianity firmly teaches that God created all things. Because of this, Christians must reject all naturalistic and evolutionary theories of origins.
The biblical Christian position on origins is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and in the beginning, God created male and female.
Modern science's roots are grounded in a Christian view of the world. This is because science is based on the assumption that the universe is orderly and understandable. Renowned philosopher and historian of science Stanley L. Jackie said that from Copernicus to Newton, it was not deism but Christian theism that served as a principal factor, helping the scientific enterprise reach self-sustaining maturity.
Christianity provided many of the basic intellectual presuppositions that made science possible in the first place. And this isn't just Christians who say this, who are trying to defend themselves. Many secular historians today, in fact, it's commonplace now among professional historians that it was in fact Christianity that gave the unique intellectual ideas that allowed science to flourish.
Perhaps no other aspect of Christianity has come under greater attack in recent years than its view of origins.
Wherever you turn, in the school systems, on television, on our discovery and learning channels, even on our history channels, there's just a great amount of evolution being presented as scientific fact. Evolution today is more than science, I can tell you that. In fact, evolution is not even a science, it's a philosophy of science.
Evolutionary theory faces problems in every area. It's pretty well known that it doesn't fit the fossil record. The fossil record does not show this pattern of slow, gradual, step-by-step change from one kind of thing into another. It shows variation within the type. Evolutionary naturalism, the Darwinian kind of evolution, doesn't fit the genetic evidence. When you try to test it, you find you can't make the big changes. You just produce birth defects when you induce mutations in organisms. It doesn't face the molecular evidence. Michael Behe has shown how molecular structures are irreducibly complex. You can't build them up by a blind, step-by-step process. So if you go from one area to another, you see it's nothing but problems and evasions, you see, to try to answer the problems. And you go to a scientist in one specialty and he'll say, I know it's all problems here, but after all, they've got it proved in all the other areas. See, so you go to the other areas and you find that it's just as bad or worse. But the worst problem is none of these things that I've mentioned. The worst problem is that living organisms are full of complex operating systems that need a program to direct their operations. Everybody knows there has to be something instructing those billion proteins where to go and what to do. And the evolutionary science has no idea how to construct such a program, no mechanism at all.
Creationists have always understood that the vast order and design in the world point toward a designer. The universe is teleological. That is, it exhibits design and order and purpose. Intelligent design calls for an intelligent designer.
Teleology, design, intelligence is something fundamental in the world and that we can know it. And so the sort of science that has been done for the last 300 years that's tried systematically to exclude intelligence is coming up short. It doesn't work. It's scientifically sterile. It's not giving the answers that we need to try to understand the phenomena that we're encountering.
The more scientists study the universe, the more they discover design. The discovery of DNA in 1953 by James Watson and Francis Crick makes it less and less likely that such a complex system could have evolved by chance. DNA contains the genetic information code and is a crucial part of all living matter. Yet evolutionary theory is powerless to explain how it came into existence.
The discovery of DNA was a big blow to materialism, and that hasn't been assimilated yet by the scientific community. But information is an irreducible component of living things. DNA was the great discovery that at the core of living things is a message, a code.
Everywhere where information begins, it has a mind behind it. We know that information is communicated by minds, and guess what? That is the basis of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, I don't think there is life in outer space, but scientists are right to say that if they got a message with information from outer space, that would signal a mind behind it. Well, there is information in DNA. Now, if there's information in DNA, the best thing to draw from that is that there's a mind behind DNA, and that would be a supreme being.
Over 100 years after Darwin's theory was made public, the evidence continues to point toward creation instead of evolution.